Well, I believe you.
Yeah,
I buy
believe
it.
man.
I just Max is claiming that he's
hard.
now Patrick Mahomes, and I don't know about that.
Fair enough.
Welcome to another episode of Boom or Bust, the draft show. Max Chadwick alongside PJ Clark, Tate Sigworth, and Nick Merriam. Another very special guest coming on right now, Field Yates, who is an NFL insider for ESPN and co-host of the First Draft podcast with Todd McShay and Mel Kiper, and also the co-host of the Fantasy Focused Football podcast. Field, thanks so much for coming on, man.
I appreciate you guys having me on. It's good to be here. And PJ, thanks for making the connection. And looking forward to talking jobs with you guys for a little bit here.
Love it. So we're going to play our draft trivia game with you later on. Numerous guests have scored 3 out of 5. Trevor Sikkema from the Draft Network holds the all-time record with 5 out of 5. Do you think that you can tie that record?
Well, Trevor's a good friend, and I also admire him in a lot of ways. My guess is probably not tying the record because I don't find myself to be on quite the same level as Trevor, but I'm going to give it my heartiest effort.
All right, love it. So we're going to ask you some questions first. So you're an NFL insider. The draft seems to be starting at 3. Trevor Lawrence seems to be locked into the Jaguars. Zach Wilson seems to be locked into the Jets. What do you think the 49ers are going to do with that 3rd overall pick?
Yeah, I think we know that it's going to be a quarterback. Obviously, you don't pay that kind of price, which included 2 first-round picks in each of the subsequent drafts after this one, plus a 3rd-round pick to move up for anything other than a quarterback. I mean, it's possible if there was a generational defensive lineman, a Chase Young-type prospect available, maybe you would consider that. But if you just look at how this draft was shaking out prior to the trade, you knew that a quarterback was going to be the prize that somebody was going to chase at the top of the order. So I think as we know, it's going to be a quarterback. And there's been enough reporting now that I'd be surprised if it wasn't Mac Jones. And Adam Schefter, the great incomparable Adam Schefter, has been suggesting as much. I don't know that we've seen the guarantee because there's really no bother in a guarantee from any position other than really pick one. But I think that there's been enough confidence flex from Schefty and others to suggest that it's going to be Mac Jones at pick 3 overall, which is why there might be even a case that the draft kind of starts at pick 4 as opposed to pick 3.
So you just mentioned it. Mac Jones seems to be locked in at 3. The 49ers are visiting Justin Fields' pro day later on next week. If not Fields at the 3rd pick, where on earth does Fields end up, in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I do think there's a chance, by the way, that it goes quarterback to start the draft, 4 quarterbacks in a row, which if you examine just the common era of the draft, which is 1967 to right now, never happened before. I think there's a chance that happens. So let's assume that the first 3 players are, as we've discussed, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and then Mac Jones at pick 3 to San Francisco. I think if a quarterback goes 4, it could be either Justin Fields or Trey Lance. I don't think that it's set in stone that it would necessarily be Trey Lance, but if it were Lance and if it were 4th that he went, then I think we have a trade-up scenario on our hands. The Bengals are well positioned that if they wanted to move down, they could certainly fetch additional draft capital. But I think what you're going to find with the Bengals and the Dolphins at pick 5 and 6 is that they probably see so much value in the players are going to be most likely available there that fit such gigantic needs for them that rather than trading down, they're going to take the bird in hand, whether that's Jamar Chase going 5 to the Bengals or Penei Sewell going 5 to the Bengals, the Oregon left tackle, and then 6th, Miami, whether that's Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase, the leftover of those 2 pass catchers that's available, or maybe even Penei Sewell. The Dolphins used a 1st-round pick on Austin Jackson out of USC last year, but fortifying the offensive line is always a good idea, especially when you have a young quarterback. And Tua's a lefty, so the right tackle spot is just as important as a left tackle spot under normal circumstances when you have a left-handed quarterback. So my guess is that a trade up for Justin Fields could take place. Maybe Detroit's primed to move down. Maybe Carolina's primed to move down, especially after trading for Sam Darnold. So I don't know that the floor for Justin Fields or Trey Lance or Mac Jones is much lower than pick 7 or 8.
So you just mentioned Carolina trades for Sam Darnold now. They seem to be good with that, picked up his option, paid a lot for him as to be their quarterback next year for the next 2 years now. So my question, especially as a Jeff fan, is why now did Carolina make that trade? Why did they not wait did you think there was another suitor for Sam Darnold maybe? Or if, Justin Fields falls to 8 in 3 weeks, are they kicking themselves that they could have just taken him there?
Well, a couple of things here is I need Tate's evaluation of Justin Fields, a presumptive Ohio State supporter based off of the shirt he is wearing. We'll ask him about that in just a little bit. But I think what we're realizing is, so the 49ers made that trade up to pick number 3, and it felt like a lot to pay, and it was a lot to pay. But what it also avoided was what it avoided was losing out on the player that you want. So let's just keep assuming it's Mac Jones at pick 3. Like, there's no risk involved now. If they move to the pick 5, there's a risk. If they move to the pick 4, there's a risk. Now they're guaranteed one of Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, or Mac Jones, which, if we presume those are the 3 players they have the most affinity for at the quarterback spot, it makes sense. So with the Panthers, I think what they realized is, all right, it's possible we could wait a little bit longer on Sam Darnold, and, maybe we could pay a different price, a little bit more, a little bit less. But what if, and I don't know this for a fact, but what if Washington was simultaneously calling the Jets and saying, hey, something? We'll give you a 2 this year, which, the value of draft picks in the current year tends to be incrementally higher than the same round pick a year later. You just don't know. There's variables, right? If the Washington football team, or I guess if Carolina wins the Super Bowl next year, you're getting 64. Well, if Washington's offering you whatever their pick, 49 or something in the second round, that's more valuable. So what if Washington saying, we'll give you a 2 this year and a 3 next year and a 6 next year, whatever the iteration of the deal they'd have to make would be, that would prevent potentially Carolina from getting the quarterback that they have deemed to be the guy they want to build their franchise around. And there are a lot of ways to react to this Sam Darnold trade. One of them would be that Carolina prefers Sam Darnold to most likely Trey Lance and also Justin Fields. And you can make the case Mac Jones because, although we do think Mac Jones is going 3rd overall, I've learned, and you don't have to be in this business for long to realize that sometimes you think you know something and then bam, the wool gets pulled over your eyes and something totally different than what you expected to happen occurs.
So you mentioned, go ahead.
No, sorry. I just wanted to follow up. So going from there, it looks like it's Zach Wilson now at 2. Do you expect, the Jets, they sent Saleh to the BYU Pro Day. They did not send Saleh to the Ohio State Pro Day. Is there anything really to read into that? And Joe Douglas mentioning Steve Young is pretty plugged in after Steve Young pretty much guaranteed Zach Wilson's a Jet. Are the tea leaves just too obvious, or is this the greatest smokescreen of all time?
Yeah, I mean, Adam Schefter, and to go rely upon him one more time, he said this publicly. He texted Zach Wilson after the Sam Darnold trade, welcome to New York. So you decide whether Schefter would do that unless he had really good intel or not. So one of the things that I think is apparent about the trade of Sam Darnold is that it allows for more transparency, right? Joe Douglas doesn't need to hide from something, because when you trade away Sam Darnold and the only quarterbacks left over on your roster, at least the only I think it was James Morgan.
Captain Morgan, baby.
Right. 4th round pick from FIU last year. Like, are you really going to go into the season with him as your quarterback?
Not.
We all know the answer to that. So you saw Joe Douglas kind of let his guard down a little bit and note that he's got good sources at BYU. He's pretty tapped in. What happens when you're like arguably the greatest player in BYU football history? So, I think that we're starting to see that it's going to most likely be back-to-back quarterbacks, and we can assign names to them as well. So, yeah, I think Zach Wilson, I'm not sure I'd put a down payment down on a home right now, but I would at least be spending a lot of time on Zillow in the New York, New Jersey area.
So you mentioned briefly there about the Falcons potentially trading back. We're hearing all sorts of stuff. The GM maybe wants to take a QB like Trey Lance. Coach Arthur Smith wants to keep building that offense, go forward with Matt Ryan. We hear they like Kyle Pitts a lot. We're also hearing a bunch of teams might be wanting to trade up. Teams like Washington, the Patriots, Denver might want to go get QBs. Kyle Pitts is loved by Jerry Jones in Dallas. We heard something today about them potentially wanting to trade up. What is the current thought process you think in Atlanta for what exactly the plan is going to the draft, and also about approaching a draft where effectively potentially the coaching staff and the general manager maybe not on the same page based on what we're hearing?
I think that sometimes I think the idea of them being on different pages maybe has gotten a little bit exaggerated. I think it's sort of pragmatic when the GM wants to do something that's best for the franchise over the next 10 years. and the coach wants to do something that's best for the franchise right now. That's just the conundrum that these two departments, coaching versus scouting, are constantly facing off against each other on, right? Because if you're Arthur Smith and you think that Matt Ryan plus Julio Jones plus Calvin Ridley plus, a solid offensive line and Kyle Pitts could score, like you probably think of yourself like, I can put up 35 a game next year, right? Like, I don't care who we have on defense. We're going to be fine. If you're Terry Fontenot, the new general manager for the Falcons, and by the way, like he hired or was involved in the process of hiring Arthur Smith, like these two did not take the job without a pretty distinct understanding of what each other was envisioning for the next 5 or 10 years together in Atlanta. So I sense harmony there. But if you're Terry Fontenot, you're probably saying to yourself, all right, so Matt Ryan's pretty good. He played him every year in New Orleans for the past 11 years that Matt Ryan's been in Atlanta, 12 years. He knows the player well enough. No, he's a solid, respectable veteran. He also realizes he's got 3 years left on his contract, and it's possible that a year or two from now, he starts to show some legitimate signs of regression, but not enough to move us. You're probably still picking like 12th, 15th, 18th, 20th based off of the talent you think you have offensively. So I don't know that you want to be bypassing a quarterback at pick 4 when you may not have that chance to draft one again in future years. So I think the rub is borderline predictable. So if I were Atlanta, I'd be dead set on a quarterback unless I could not warm up to either Justin Fields or Trey Lance. But I think that I would be thinking long and hard about a quarterback, even if Matt Ryan has a couple of years of good football left in him.
Okay, so shifting away from the order of the NFL draft to the Senior Bowl, which you were lucky enough to go to. And the Senior Bowl is usually a good barometer for guys who perform well there, will probably perform well in the NFL. Who are some guys that off the top of your head stood out to you during that week? Yeah,
so it's funny. The player that stood out the most was Mac Jones. And it's, I won't forget this now because, and I didn't think this was going to be the case, but I was getting dropped off at the airport, or I pulled into the rental car lot at the airport, and I was walking into the baggage claim area, or maybe it was even security. I don't know. You guys know there are different elements of a airport. I was only down there for a few days. I didn't check a bag. I was walking in security, and I remember thinking to myself on the way out, hey, every year at the Senior Bowl, it feels like at least one player really boosts his stock, and we've seen quarterbacks have that success in recent years. Carson Wentz did it, and then I think that Daniel Jones really did it for himself. Justin Herbert was already regarded as a top flight quarterback, but he kind of further put himself on the map with a great Senior Bowl week in 2020. I tweeted, hey, every year a quarterback, or almost every year a quarterback, can really boost his stock artificially or legitimately by a great week in the Senior Bowl. It feels like Mac Jones did everything he could. He was that guy this year. But I didn't think that that meant he was going to be the 3rd overall pick in the draft. But Mac Jones was super solid all week, was the player amongst all the players. He was the guy that everybody was kind of gravitating towards. He was the one that everybody was saying, like, this guy is different, right? It almost felt like the spotlight was shining brighter on Mac Jones than anybody else. There were a bunch of offensive and defensive linemen I thought looked solid. The big issue down there is that you're not really tackling, and you really are, the pass protection drills, or you're not going after a quarterback because you're not tackling these quarterbacks during those drills. So I've reserved a little bit of judgment on those offensive and defensive linemen. There are a lot of really good players there, but it was easier to kind of get a feel for some of these wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, et cetera, some cornerbacks as well. So I thought that wide receiver-wise, Kadarius Toney, probably the second best prospect there in terms of where he'll be drafted. Florida wide receiver, who's a joystick, really hard to cover. Didn't finish the week because of an injury, but nothing to be concerned about there going forward. Najee Harris and Devontae Smith were there. Najee did some walkthrough type stuff. Devontae Smith did nothing. Still that finger issue from the national championship game. So those are the obvious ones, but some of the others that stood out had Dwayne Eskridge, wide receiver from Western Michigan, had a really solid week where he showed he could hang. Quinn Miners, everybody knows about him by now, is the University of Wisconsin Whitewater guard, center, interior offensive lineman, walked around with the crop top, had that big belly flopping out. But Wisconsin Whitewater, how many guys we see from Wisconsin Whitewater make it into the NFL? The answer is not many, but he showed that he's not just a good story and internet sensation. He can hang as well. That guy was really, really impressive during that week.
Are there any prospects you think the media this cycle during the draft are overrating perhaps compared to how the NFL sees them, and perhaps the other way around, the media is underrating?
Yeah, it's a good question in terms of overrating, underrating. I don't have a feel for someone who's being overrated. I think what's going to be interesting is so let's be honest. When quarterbacks slide a little bit, that's when we keep an eye on that. That's how we determine whether a guy was maybe perhaps overrated or underrated by the media. So if any of the quarterbacks slide a little bit, then maybe we will have a little bit of a misread on them, because we've all been talking. I said earlier, I think the floor for the quarterbacks is pick 8. I think that's still going to be the case, but we'll see there. I don't know if there's anybody who comes to mind as definitely overrated. Underrated, I think Jalen Phillips, who was underrated prior to his pro day. He's former UCLA, big-time recruit, ends up at Miami, freak, just an absolute pro day wonder, but also a good college season this past year for Miami, sack master, maybe the best pass rusher in this year's class. I think he is a pretty solid player who's going to end up being an instant impact guy for somebody somewhere. There's always good running back depth, but I don't know that I'm necessarily inclined to make a running back a premium pick this year. Terrace Marshall Jr. from LSU will be an interesting one. We'll see where he ends up. Had a monster season 2 years ago when LSU won the national championship. He had 13 receiving touchdowns, third on the team amongst wide receivers because of Jamar Chase and also Justin Jefferson. The question will be, he's got excellent height, weight, speed. The question will be how teams view him, because he had a much different season playing amongst great players than he did playing amongst, lesser talent this past year. Still a really good player, but I'll keep my eyes. I'm not sure what range he'll wind up going in the draft. I think maybe late first round to maybe early to middle of the second.
So one of the big storylines right now is the salary cap. Obviously, it changed, and a lot of teams were in trouble, specifically New Orleans. My question, it's kind of like a series of questions. Is the salary cap real anymore? Are contracts real? What are voidable years? Because nobody knows. Is Taysom Hill a real contract? You see where I'm going with this?
I do, yeah. So first of all, the cap is unquestionably real. If it wasn't real, I'll put it to the group here. Who's the Saints' key free agent acquisition this offseason? Yeah, that's right. That's kind of the answer, right?
Yeah.
It's a rhetorical.
Yeah.
They ended up signing.
I can tell you a bunch of guys they lost. Yeah.
That's right. So they ended up signing Nick Vanette. They ended up signing Alex Arma, a fullback, but
Tagging
blocking
Marcus
tight end
Williams.
and a fullback. That's right. Yeah, but Marcus Williams is an in-house guy, right? So it's the players, they were able to
But it was
keep
an
a decent amount
accomplishment.
of players. Yeah. So they ended up obviously cutting Janoris Jenkins amongst several other players. Josh Hill is a good tight end. Versatile tight end they cut. So the point I'm trying to make is the cap definitely exists, definitely real. It's just a matter of whether you want to pay the price now or to pay the price later. And eventually what's going to happen to you is that it's going to be really hard to climb the mountaintop when you keep pushing the problem into future years. And I think that's a problem the Steelers are dealing with right now. Is that the Steelers obviously were the last undefeated team in football last year, but they also were a flawed football team, and we all saw it. It did not take long for us to all who joked, hey, this is the most overrated 11-0 team of all time, to be vindicated, right? I mean, they struggled down the stretch, and then they played, the Browns JV squad in the playoffs, and they got absolutely run out of the gate. So, at the stadium, I should say. So, salary cap is real. Voidable years are pretty simple. So, basically, what the NFL allows you to do is, and this is sort of into the nerdy portion of the program, but when you have a signing bonus hits the salary cap equally over the life of the contract. So if it's a $10 million signing bonus on a 2-year contract, it hits the salary cap for $5 million in year 1 and $5 million in year 2. However, the maximum number of years that you can reach is 5. So if you had a 10-year contract for a $10 million and with a $10 million signing bonus, it's going to hit it $2 million a year for the first 5, and then it will not count towards the salary cap in the last 5 years of that contract. As we know, most contracts in the NFL are not longer than 5 years, Patrick Mahomes being one of the most unique exceptions. But voidable years come into play because what you do is you create voidable years, which when you do that, you are adding fake years onto the back end of the contract. But what you're allowing yourself to do is to prorate the signing bonus over a longer period of time. So let's just say, again, it's a 5-year contract it's a 2-year contract with a $10 million signing bonus. Rather than hitting it $5 million in year 1 and $5 million in year 2, if you add 3 voidable years onto the contract, it's going to hit $2 million in year 1, $2 million in year 2. And then here's where it gets tricky, is that initially it's scheduled to count for $2 million in void year 1, void year 2, and void year 3. If a player is not re-signed before the contract voids, which is typically around the beginning of the new league year, sometimes 5 days before free agency, then that remaining $6 million of signing bonus money hits the cap in the first void year. So it ends up being that signing bonus for $10 million counts $2 million in year 1, $2 million in year 2, and then $6 million in year 3. When there's a chance that player doesn't even play for you. So you're going to have $6 million in dead money sitting on the cap when that guy's playing for somebody else. Rob Peter to pay Paul is kind of the premise here, right? But these things do catch up to you, and there's some dancing with the devil you got to do. But when the salary cap goes down by 17 or $16 million like it did this past year, you may not have a choice. Your only choice is to get through this season. I mean, the Packers, the Saints, Chiefs, actually not the Chiefs, but the Packers, the Saints, the Eagles, a bunch of teams, they had to kind of compromise their spending this offseason because of the depressed salary cap.
So going off of that, I guess the depressed salary cap, the team that spent money that is not usual. The Patriots doled out $100 million on the first day to a bunch of players. Do you think that's more of them taking advantage and kind of, they haven't necessarily drafted well recently, but is that taking advantage of nobody else having money to spend and they were able to get all of these players?
I think it was a confluence of factors. Is that so? People are saying like, oh, the year after Tom Brady, they start spending in free agency. Yeah, well, they've had a lot of really great players for a long time who are making a lot of money, right? So they haven't had a lot of money to spend in free agency. If you go look, it's not like the Patriots ever just sat on their hands with $25 million in salary cap space. They've been spending as much as they've had available. And it makes me laugh a little bit when people are like, what they could have done. It's like, they won 6 Super Bowls in 19 years. Like, they went to 9 of them. Like, what could they have done? Like, what would the expectation have been instead, right? Like, of all the things to criticize, like, the idea that winning 6 in 19 years is not sufficient. But I think it was a confluence of factors, is that they had salary cap space, whether the salary cap was up to $210 million or it was down to $182.5 million. So because it was down, it created that buyer's market for the teams that did have spending. Moreover, there are other teams that had spending, they had resources, but they weren't in the timeline to spend. Not all their money, right? So like Jacksonville, for example, had a lot of free agency, a lot of salary cap to spend in free agency. Now they did dip their toe. I mean, they signed Marvin Jones, Shaq Griffin, amongst other players. It's not like they sat out during free agency, but they weren't as aggressive as some people thought. But Jacksonville's also going to have a rookie quarterback. They're going to be they're probably going to be a bad team this year, right? I don't think they're going to win the division. They might win 6 games this year, which would be a 5-game improvement, by the way. So I think that if you're Jacksonville, you're saying to yourself, is it worth accelerating the timeline when our franchise quarterback is 22 years old and like dealing with, shoulder surgery recovery? Probably not. So the Patriots definitely took advantage of the buyer's market. They took advantage of their timeline, and they took advantage of the fact that right now they don't have a quarterback under contract for a lot of money. And I understand that Cam Newton can make $14 million this year. The only way Cam Newton's making $14 million this year is if he is an all-pro Super Bowl MVP. And you guys decide whether $14 million is worth it for an all-pro Super Bowl MVP type season. So the reality is that Cam's contract is at the very bottom of the quarterback market. So because the Patriots didn't have a big quarterback on the books, because a lot of teams didn't have salary cap, and because there were a lot of free agents available, the Patriots took advantage of all that. And, we'll see whether these contracts age. As we know, free agency has often looked different 2 years after those contracts are signed. But from a talent standpoint, the roster looks to be in much better shape.
So going off of that, you mentioned Jacksonville. We see a lot of turnover in the NFL, especially now with an extra playoff spot. It's easier to get in. What team do you think that was bad this year? And I think San Francisco is a pretty obvious one if they have a good quarterback there and they're getting everybody back that was injured. But who are maybe some other teams that were bad this year that you think can bounce back and be one of those quick turnarounds?
Yeah, San Francisco will be a team that'll be much better this year. Dallas will be much better this year because Dak will be healthy. The division is still weak, in my opinion. I can't quit Minnesota. I think they're going to bounce back. I know that their quarterback play is up and down and that their defensive play was terrible this past year. But that will be one as well. And then I would say, let's keep an eye on Carolina. They've got a lot of belief in Sam Darnold. Defense was super young last year. They, as we all know, first team to ever use all of its draft picks in a single draft on one side of the ball, which is what they did on defense last year. So all their defensive draft picks this past season played, or at least some of them, I should say, played a key role. I think they have a chance to maybe build off of that and become a better team going into this season.
Sam Darnold being good would kill PJ inside.
I
know it. I know you say you root for him. That would kill PJ inside.
I will. I'm rooting for him forever, but that would be. Listen, he's set up better than the Jets ever could have given him, so it's fine.
Yeah, we'll see. Phil, there's a lot of high, really good prospects in this draft that didn't play this year. Jamar Chase, Micah Parsons, and Penei Sewell. The interesting thing is that a lot of them, their stocks have kind of stayed the same as we thought they were going into the season, where Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell still probably top 5 picks. Do you think more players, even after the pandemic, are going to look at that and say, hey, why would I risk injury playing for free another year? And why don't I just opt out now when my stock is at an all-time high?
Yeah, I don't want to be the old man yelling at the clouds here, guys. But, you guys are all in college. That experience is awesome. I understand that you don't get paid in college right now. And I understand that there's a lot on the line, but I know this is something that was talked about a lot with basketball, but Zion loved playing with his Duke teammates. Those were his boys. Those were his best friends, right? That probably killed Jamar Chase to watch LSU struggle for a lot of this year. And I get it, and COVID definitely complicated things, but you're a competitor. I was a terrible Division III athlete at Wesleyan. I played football and lacrosse, but I poured my heart and soul into the opportunity to watch the games from the bench. These are competitors. These are the most elite athletes in the world. It's possible that there are a couple players that decide that they're gonna bypass a single season of college football. But no matter how great these guys are, ask Trevor Lawrence whether he got better as a player this past year. And we all know what the answer is going to be. He's going to say, no question. To think that at 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, that sitting out a year doesn't have potential downside as well, I think is naive. So I really hope that this will become a trend. And I get it. It's easy for me to say when I'm not a college athlete. I don't have to worry about my livelihood. But as somebody who just, as a college football fan, I would love to see the best players out there every single day.
That's actually pretty funny because a recurring bit for us, Max is a big Penn State fan. When Micah Parsons would be live tweeting the Penn State games, he would be like, oh my, and Penn State was terrible this year. And he would be like, what is going on? And we were like, well,
you're not there. He's like, oh, the defense is so bad. And I'm like, Micah, that's because you're not there, buddy. You're the reason why the defense is letting up 40 points.
He's a special player, huh? Yeah, totally.
He's awesome.
So I wanted to get, it's hard to place guys, at least fantasy wise, when you don't know what team they're playing for. But where do you think, it's a deep group of wide receivers, just like it was last year. You have perhaps maybe the greatest tight end prospect of all time, a lot of running back depth. What are the fantasy implications for this class as it stands right now?
Well, I think that, so while you'd love to see a running back go really, really high, like Saquon Barkley and Christian McCaffrey have been running backs that have gone in the top 7 or 8 picks that have proven to be perfectly set up to contribute right away, especially Saquon. Sometimes there's an advantage when you don't have a Saquon or McCaffrey level prospect because they go to a team little bit further down the draft order that could potentially really use them and is really good. So as an example, I got a buddy who covers the Bills, Marcel Louis-Jacques, who covers them for the for ESPN. And he's been banging the gavel on Travis Etienne to the Bills at pick 30. And I don't know if Etienne will be there. Who knows? Marcel is conceding he doesn't know that as well. But like if the Bills added Etienne, like he could be an absolute force in that offense, right? He's a really good player playing for a team that could be one of the two best offenses in football next year. So I think we'll see where the running backs end up. As far as the wide receivers go, a little bit of a unique year this year as well, because, you know, we talked about some of the teams that could be in the market for wide receivers early. Atlanta, veteran quarterback. Cincinnati, we saw it last year. Like Joe Burrow, when he plays, is going to throw it a lot and be pretty good. Miami, TBD, but I think for the most part, wide receivers set up well. And then with Kyle Pitts, you know, I could almost blindly put him into my top 6 or 7 of tight end rankings, no matter where he goes. And some of that's just really an indictment of the fact that, as you guys know, it's impossible to find a tight end in fantasy. It's just remarkably difficult to do.
Especially if he's in Atlanta, right? I mean, that would just be wild if they could get him.
It would be great.
So before we get to our normal end of guest episode shenanigans, I want to ask you about a tweet that you sent out during free agency. I just thought it was funny. I don't want you to tell the story. So your phone apparently froze up for about 2 hours during free agency there.
Yeah,
and
terrible.
It was a tough time.
It was a tough time. So my wife and I live in Connecticut, where, you know, it's not quite as cold as upstate New York, but it gets pretty chilly now. And I woke up one morning, and I get up every morning with the dog, who's right now sleeping behind me, but he's always up around 6 a.m. So I haven't set an alarm in years, or at least since the start of COVID, when we got him, I guess. And he gets up, same time, same place every day. We go for the exact same walk every single day. It's about an hour. So we stay out of the house. My dog sleeps on our bed, and he goes right back onto bed with my wife when I get back from the walk. So I thought everything was fine. He gets up, I put my phone down. I try to go take care of him. I come back, phone won't turn on. I freaked out. And now the good news is I have iMessage on my, or whatever it is, Apple Message on my laptop. I've got an Apple Watch. So I had some recourse, like to communicate via text. And during free agency, especially, a lot of the communication I have with various sources is through text because things are moving so fast. But not having your phone is it's a nightmare. And Apple Message only gets messages from fellow iPhone users. So I went through the usual routine, which is try to fix it myself, go on YouTube to look for some quick hacks. Nothing. It needed to be brought to the Apple Store, which, as you guys may or may not know, sometimes a Genius Bar appointment can be like incredibly difficult to secure. So a few hours later, it finally got back into action. There were some breathless moments there, but we powered through, and I think the health of my phone is enough to get through however much longer it is until I'm due for an upgrade. It was not a good moment, though.
Ed, I got to ask about CISCO, your dog. I'm sure people who follow you know about your dog. Did you name him after legendary Syracuse football player Andre Cisco?
I thought about it. No, so Andre is my favorite prospect in this year's class because of that reason. Cisco is actually named after the Cisco Brewery on Nantucket. So if all you guys are 21 now, I think many of you are close enough.
He'll get there.
Okay, good. Well, when you get there, it'll be worth your opportunity to go to the Cisco Brewery nice. Go to the Cisco Brewery on Nantucket. It's a great, great place. And it's a place that my wife and I spend a lot of time. And Cisco has spent a lot of time there, and his namesake brewery. He's a very, very popular guy there.
So you mentioned Andre Cisco. You got like 30 seconds on your favorite prospect in the draft because of his name.
Yeah. I mean, I hope he, obviously has dealt with a pretty serious knee issue in recent seasons. So I would assume, we're at the point now where, ACL tears don't really scare you as much as they did back in the day. There are a couple decent, I think that this year's safety class is not, I think Trayvon Merrick from TCU is probably going to be the number one player pick. I would think Cisco's a potential day 2 pick. Don't hold me to that. I'm not Mel Kiper Jr. or Todd McShay. I just spent a lot of time with them, but I like Cisco. I think he's a very athletic guy. Syracuse seems to always have some athletic defensive backs. So I think he's got a chance to be a pretty useful starter at some point for somebody.
All right, so we're in the end of episode shenanigans. We always like to ask our guests this question. We did our own NFL combine of sorts, had varying results. We'll be publishing a new one in a few weeks. So what do you think your results would be if you were to do a 40, like a broad jump, a long throw of a football, and a 3-cone?
Yeah.
40, probably like 5.5, something like that. Slow, very slow for sure.
It's not bad.
That's
faster than us.
So
Okay,
Than half this podcast.
we have people come on being like, I can run a sub 5. It's like, are you sure? Like, really?
Sam
Definitely
Monson was big. I might be able to run a sub 5. I hope Sam. I don't know.
Come
It's
on,
kind of hard.
Sam. 5.5 would be my guess in a 40 with a pulled hamstring for sure. 3-cone, I don't know, man, like 9.5 seconds maybe. I'm not super agile. How far could I throw a football? Man, it's been a while since I've like tried 50 yards maybe.
Wow.
Okay. That's
Okay, so we had for a long throw, we had somebody throw like 47 yards, and we had somebody throw 19.
I can throw way more than 19, that's for sure.
Yeah.
who do you
yes.
think?
So, I
Who do
mean-
you think on the screen threw it 19 yards? Just for the record.
I have no idea. Not my Tate's. He's rocking Ohio State swag. Not Tate. Who was it?
Nick didn't do it, so it's between me and
between
Four
me-
Eyes PJ over there.
Between me and Max, who looks the least athletic out of both of us?
Well, I don't know about least athletic, but I don't know. Was it you, PJ? Did you throw it 19 yards?
No, it was very much not. It was my baseball experience was good for one thing and one thing only, was out throwing 19 yards. Yeah.
We'll work on it, Max. Don't worry.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
He claims that he's like
Win?
way better now and is
The
not
ball-
going to.
The ball was
Here you go.
deflated.
Yeah, so
and-
it works for
which
Tom
is-
Brady, but
no,
it
it was
for
difficult.
you.
It's, like, I don't know why they took away the first round pick for the Patriots. It actually was a detriment for me. And it was raining. NFL size football. I think you guys use a college size football. So
This is
I had a lot going against me.
justifications. This is now a year of justification for putting it on the internet that he threw a football 19 yards.
Sure, whatever.
Maybe I'll
We're
reset.
getting
Maybe my answer is 42, by the way, or something like that. If you
Okay.
say if 50 sounds too aggressive, then
Well, I believe you.
Yeah,
I
I
buy
believe
it.
it, man.
Max is claiming
think it's
that
that
he's
hard.
now Patrick Mahomes, and I don't know about that.
fair enough.
We'll
Okay.
see.
Deal.
All right, last question for you before our trivia game. So I stupidly made a deal with all of our guests saying that I'm going to guess every single first round pick. However many I get
Okay.
wrong, I have to drink a smoothie with ingredients of our guests choosing. We have like Malort's, which is a horrible brand of Chicago liquor, absinthe, couple eggs, Old Bay seasoning, other nasty stuff. What would you like to contribute to that smoothie?
Just one ingredient is what you're saying.
Yeah,
Sure.
go
yeah.
nuts.
Okay, so we talked about CISCO Brewery. There's a Nantucket Secret Spice. It's got all kinds of blends. This would be very savory, which wouldn't necessarily sound so appealing for a smoothie. So go ahead and throw the Nantucket Secret Spice in there for me. That's my contribution.
Sounds good.
That's good.
Sounds good.
I love it. I love it.
We'll do that. Okay, so now it's time for our draft trivia game. So how it works, if you score 3 out of 5, we're going to rename our Twitter to Boom or Bust, the Field Yates fan account for a whole week.
A wonderful
Send you
prize.
some merch when we get it. Only 5 for 5. Again, Trevor Sikkema of the Draft Network. So you ready to go?
I'm ready to go. I might get 1 out of 5, but what do you do if I get 1 out of 5? Like, do you get what's the answer there?
You
We'll
can ship the
send
smoothie
merch.
with
We'll
Max.
still send merch.
Yeah, we
We'll
haven't. We'll get you something. We haven't
drop
actually
something.
gotten that far yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're going to do that. Okay, so number 1. So this wide receiver was the last one to go first overall in the draft. He was drafted in 1996.
Keyshawn Johnson.
All right, 1 for 1.
All right.
Nailed it.
One for
That was
one.
quick too.
Colleague.
All right, so we're not getting a non-QB first overall this year, but can you name the last 3 who went first overall, non-quarterbacks?
The last 3 non-quarterbacks go first overall. Okay, so 2017 was Myles Garrett.
Congratulations, Tate.
There we go. 2000 and let me see if I can get through. 2015 was 2014 was Jadeveon Clowney.
Mhm.
2013 was Eric Fisher.
All right, nailed
Wow,
it. 2 for
okay.
2.
Wow, here we
2
go.
for 2. We already hit it.
Very hot already. So you worked for the Chiefs and the Patriots before joining ESPN. Can you name each team's last 3 first-round picks.
Each team's last 3 first-round picks. All right. So,
Thank you.
in the order, is that what you said?
No.
Okay. So the Patriots have had 3 since 2018. N'Keal Harry, Sony Michel, and Isaiah Wynn.
Okay.
Bingo.
The Chiefs, Clyde Edwards-Helaire in 2020. Let's see, 2019, they traded their pick for Frank Clark. 2018, they didn't have it because of the Patrick Mahomes trade. 2017 was Patrick Mahomes.
He's pretty good. I've heard of him.
And yeah, he's got a future in this league, I would think. And give me a moment here to see if I could uncover 2016 or 2015. I'm just trying to think about the roster.
This one
now.
was a wild.
This is tough.
This one is wild.
Okay. Hey. All right. Well, just give me a second here. Can I think about it while we go to? Can I think about it while we go to question 4 in the interest of not holding up the? Okay,
yes.
Fair enough.
Yes. All right.
Okay.
Nick, take it away.
So you graduated from Wesleyan University, which is a D3 school. You already talked about this. You played lacrosse and football there. 2 NFL head coaches are also alumni of Wesleyan. One is still a coach. One isn't. Who are they?
Yeah, that's right. Well, Bill Belichick, the GOAT, is a Wesleyan alum, 1975. And, of course, Eric Mangini from Hartford, Connecticut, class of 92.
Wow, even the years.
Just nailing it. Absolutely.
All-time sack leader.
He's
He's actually an all-time leader in sacks when he actually when he finished his football career.
How about that? We didn't even
So,
get that far. I miss Eric, man.
Yeah.
Holy crap. So what are we, 3 for 3 right now?
3 for 3. Still outstanding.
Provisionally.
Yeah. I've got
outstanding the last Kansas City.
Yeah. Gosh, this is crazy. It's gonna come to me if you just let me sort of keep on
All right,
figuring this one out.
You want to rip number 5 in the interim then?
Let's do it. All right.
So we always ask everybody something about their co-host. So your co-host, Matthew Berry, Syracuse alum, came here a couple of years ago. We all met him. Great guy. He produced a comedy show for our campus TV station. He has talked about it on the 06010. Do you know the name or the main character or who was the focus of that show? The guy's name.
Oh man, you're gonna stump me here. And I thought I was in I told you Trevor is good, man. He is really freaking good. I am going to go with, I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm still thinking about this Chiefs. I keep thinking defensive player. Chiefs defensive players that I'm trying to think about right now.
It is. I'll give you that. It is a defensive player.
It is. Yeah. I'm just trying to pull it together right now, which is so embarrassing that I can't think of it. So my answer is on the. I thought this was going to be one of those because he worked on what's it called with Al Bundy. I don't know. I honestly don't know. What's the website what's the Syracuse basketball blog? Noon's Magician, which I know is not related to it at all, but I just wanted to prove that I have some level of Syracuse knowledge.
Something? All right. So the Matthew Berry's TV show is Uncle Bobo's World of Fun. Does that ring a bell at all for you?
Not at all. That must have been back in the old days of the podcast, and I can't even figure out the last first round pick by the Chiefs on defense. It's just killing me. First rounder, not a linebacker, I don't think, not an outside linebacker, not a defensive lineman. Don't think. Could it be first rounder?
He's pretty good. He's pretty good. It's a name.
I mean, I'm surprised that I can't think of it right now. I don't know. Who was it? Who am I forgetting?
It was Marcus Peters.
Oh, Marcus Peters. Yeah. Gosh.
That's a lot of teams.
That is a lot. Yeah. Been on a lot of teams.
That was tough because you only think of the Chiefs, you think Marcus Peters. So.
Yeah, that's true. Wow, that's a good one right there. All right. Trevor keeps his lead. No surprise. Trevor's got excellent draft. He's such a smart, excellent draft analyst. If I were buying stock right now in a young draft analyst, I'd be buying stock in Trevor Sikkema. Wouldn't be surprised if he's running a network one day with his ability. So,
Oof, not Boomer Bust the Draft Show. Oof, not Boomer Bust the Draft Show. That's pretty brutal.
I didn't say I'm only buying one stock.
He didn't say he was only buying one stock. We're still available for purchase.
We're still there.
Of course.
No,
Trevor's level first.
Trevor's the best, but Field 3 out of 5, man. You still got it.
Nailed it.
You
Stuck
hit
it
above where you thought. So
I'm going 3 2/3 out of 5. You know?
Yeah, you got. Listen, you got the Patriots question.
Would you round up to 4? So basically 4 out of 5.
There you go.
So what? We always like to ask: would you like to challenge anyone to try and come on and beat your score?
Yeah. I'm assuming you want draft people or what?
Whatever you want. Go nuts.
Trying to think of somebody who's like, all right, have you guys had, and I apologize if you have, because I have another one. Have you guys had Jordan Reed on yet or no?
No, not. Someone, we were trying to get him too. So yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, good. All right. So That's my other person. Like, my other person that I just think, I think the world of Trevor, and I think the world of Jordan. I think those guys are so good, so talented. They teach me something every time I watch them or listen to them or read them. So Jordan, if you're listening, I think you do a phenomenal job on this show.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. So, Field Yates, thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys. Have a great rest of your spring, and go mock draft. And I can't wait for April 29th, 3 weeks from when we're having this conversation.
Yeah, we can't either.
Yes, sir.
So, for
All right,
PJ
guys.
Clark, Tate Sigworth, Nick Merriam, Max Chadwick, have a great night.